everybody. This is Jessica of Jessica-esque, and today I am doing my April reading wrap up. Yay. Over the month of April, I read 8 books, so really sticking with the theme. It was 8 January, February, and March, and somehow I managed to do 8 again in April. This was across 2,336 pages. The first book that I finished in April was The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. And while I really loved the book and the universe that it created, there's something about the word irregular in the title that really bothers me and makes me think that it's a very different uh, story when I include that word. But rest assured, it's nothing to do with the digestive tract. And it's all about the secrecy that has been employed and implored throughout this sort of witchy world that the author creates. And I gave it a 4-star rating. There were definitely points where it was, using the what I would call like romance tropes, not even tropes, but the romance writing of using that sort of common denominator phrase. I wish I had an example, but just the idea that, oh, that person, made me madder than anything, and or something like that. That's not a true example, but yeah, when there's phrases like that in any kind of book, I really notice, and I just find in the romance novels that I have read, the like contemporary romance novels, I see a lot more of those, and I don't think they're necessary. Like I think the authors could expand and branch out a little, but those complaints aside, it was a really cool and really lovely book. There were some twists and turns, and I won't give anything away, but definitely worth giving it a shot for sure. The next book I finished was The Canterville Ghost by Oscar Wilde. This was like a really short book, and it was one that I think was originally written for a younger audience. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It's very funny. I laughed out loud quite a few times. And it's sort of like this ghost. I don't know if I can call him a preeminent ghost, like a ghost that's been haunting this manor for a few hundred years. And an American family buys the estate and is warned, like, there's this notorious ghost. He's been frightening people to death for decades, if not centuries. And, be aware and maybe don't, wander the halls at night and whatnot. And it's a really cute reflection on like class as well as culture and the meeting of American and British culture. And there's quite a few funny and snide remarks about the difference between those two cultures. So if you're looking for a like cute ghost story that will make you laugh, can't recommend it enough. Apparently, I didn't rate it at all on Storygraph. Don't remember. The next book I finished was Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton. And this is a American book that I read as part of one of my Storygraph challenges. And I didn't love it, but I certainly didn't hate it either. It's basically about this man, Ethan, who is just like displeased with his lot in life. And he, got very sick when he was a younger man, and his now wife sort of nursed him back to health. And because everyone around him was like, wow, you've got a great lady there, she's, stuck with you and nursed you back to health, so I guess you're going to marry her. And he, being a wet noodle that he seemingly is, was like, yeah, okay, yeah, what could go wrong? And apparently a lot. He was very miserable in his marriage. And then the start of the book is when her sister, no, not her sister, her family relation comes. She's in a bad way. She's like constantly looking for work through the generosity of like extended family and people that they know. And so she is welcomed into their home to be kind of like a maid, kind of. Um, I never quite understood what her work was. Maybe I just missed it. Um, but the majority of what she did was just hang out with him and his wife. Was constantly going to doctors, and as far as Ethan was concerned, she was like what we would now call a hypochondriac. So somebody who is maybe just falsifying or creating possible symptoms in their head and insisting that they're sick in some way. That was the wife to a T. And so it's this story about Ethan Frome trying to get it going with the cousin. Um, and it has a pretty, I found it a satisfying ending. I don't know if anyone else would. But given his sort of character throughout the story, it felt like a suitable ending, and I'll leave it at that. The next book I finished, I had started quite a while ago, back in I think February, and anyway, the book is All Creatures Great and Small by James Herriot, a classic, one that, I have seen many episodes of the old original uh, television adaptation, which was always very cute, but didn't hold my interest as a child too much. It was just set outdoors and on farms, and that was very appealing to me. So it was cool to pick it up as an adult, and it's all about it's a memoir, and it's all about James Herriot's life fresh out of vet school. um, and he moves, I think he's from Scotland. I don't remember if where he took his vet college, but then he moves to Yorkshire, I think, and the culture is just very different from anywhere else he's lived or visited. And it's a very sweet book. I did find for the first half of the book, I had to take a lot of breaks in between chapters, because the life of a vet is not sunshine and roses. And there were lots of, tales in which he felt inadequate to the job, or an animal maybe didn't survive in the way that he thought that they would. And then there's lots of stories in which the opposite is true. And you're sort of meeting these animals as characters in his life. I'm getting misty eyed already. Oh, God. Let's take a pause. I'm just in one of those moods this week where every little thing is overwhelming me with emotion. And it's like nice things, it's very beautiful things, but I'm just losing it. I'm on a razor's edge here. So if that's not enough, it was a 5-star review. But like I said, I needed to take breaks, and that's why there was such a gap in between when I started and when I actually finished. Because it's still so popular. So many people want to read this book. So if you have ever thought about it, please gift yourself the opportunity to read it and get started, because it's a lovely book. The next book I finished in April was In the Company of Killers by Elora Cook, who I know. So Elora and I worked together one summer at the previous public library that I worked at, and we were able to maintain contact and friendship. And during the time that we were working together, she was working on like a manuscript, and she had already, I believe, finished the manuscript for In the Company of Killers. And so this was years ago, and it was really really cool, and I felt very honored to be sort of welcomed into her process and her world, just trying to get this out into some sort of publication. I So what I can say is that it was a long process, and it felt like I got to be there for many steps along the way. And I asked our children's librarian, who's also in charge of teens, and the YA collection, to order this book. So we got it for the library, and then I was able to be the first one to check it out, and get us that stat. So anyway, the story of the book itself, this is a YA novel. It's set in sort of like that senior year of high school, and it's been described as The Sopranos meets Gossip Girl. So it's very much that like youthful and young cast of characters with parents and maybe like older siblings as well. But the main focus is on these late teenagers. And that makes it sound like they're dead. Older teenagers, like 17, 18. Anyway, both of their parents, it's like the story goes back between Natasha's perspective and Leo's perspective, and both of their parents and their families are involved in sort of warring mob families in New York. So it's very glitzy. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of betrayal and treachery, and it's just so well done. And I'm so proud and so happy to have seen this go from something that Alora had just finished, and was shopping around looking for agents, got one, looking for publishers, rejected, finally got one, and then it became a real book. And that is just so impressive, and I'm so happy that I got to hold it in my hands and read through it. The next book I finished was a memoir called Lovely One by Ketanji Brown Jackson. Always flip those surnames in my head. And this was the first Black woman to be appointed to the Supreme Court. And that reality is, the last few chapters of what is a considerably long book. And it is just so well written, such beautiful reflections. I feel like she gives a lot of herself and her life and her experiences. And I would say every other chapter I was like crying, because I was so moved by something that she had to experience, or something that a family member would say to her, or something um, she really goes back. It becomes quite a like sweeping epic of many generations. Everything about it. It obviously 5 stars, and it was just so beautiful. I listened to the audiobook, which she narrates, which I think also made it very impactful, to hear God, to hear her, recalling these formative experiences. I'm gonna have to move on from this because I'm losing my mind. But it's a beautiful book, and I highly, highly recommend it. The second last book that I finished in April is Affinity by Sarah Waters. And I've read one other Sarah Waters before, The Little Stranger. This Affinity was the last book in our book club theme for ghosts. And it's all about a spiritualist who has been sent to prison for like assault. And it's all told through the perspective of this young adult, Margaret, who has just lost her father. Um, God, she's just getting blow after blow, you know, like she is doing her best and life just keeps coming at her. And the book starts with her being encouraged by, you know, a friend of a friend or something to go and visit a women's prison in London that's somewhat nearby. And she goes, and so you're introduced to the prison itself and the wardens, all of these women who are widowed or spinsters, single. And she starts to meet many of the inmates and gets a sense of their lives and what it consists of and why they might be there. We really suspect that Sarah Waters, you know, pulled a lot of these characters, if not the people themselves, but the experiences that they went through and what it is that brought them there to the prison. We suspect that she pulled those from like the archives. So, for instance, one of the characters who was there, she was there because she tried to abort her baby, and that could get you put in jail at the time. And the reason that she did that is because she was a maid and her employer's son, you know, forced himself on her. Um, and there would be other scenarios as well that, yeah, were just a sign of how damned if you were, damned if you weren't, damned if you did, damned if you didn't. If you were a woman at that time, especially if you were anything below like a pretty wealthy class. So it's a story of betrayal. There's a lot of that thematically. And it's a story of like entrapment and imprisonment, whether you're in the prison or you're just a woman, even if you're a like wealthy woman, what are your options? Like, where do you go? So, one of the great relationships that she is mourning at the start is the loss of her father, who seemed to treat her like she was almost like she was a man, in the sense that like he encouraged her to help help him with his research, and he was going to take her and his other female research assistant, Helen, off to Italy, and they didn't make it there before he died. And Helen was a love interest for Margaret until she married her brother. And so she sees Helen lots because the brother and Helen come round for dinner, and it's just heartbreaking, just heartbreaking. And so Margaret just feels like she has nothing else going on in her life, really. And I want to do a whole review video on it, and I'm basically doing that now. But 5 stars, absolutely gut wrenching, not for the faint of heart, but highly recommend. And then the last book that I finished in April was The Three of Us. So this was a shorter book. I really, really enjoyed it. It's told in 3 parts from 3 different perspectives. It is about a woman who's sort of at the nexus of these relationships, and her husband and her best friend. And there's a lot of animosity in a couple of different directions, and it's all sort of set over the course of one afternoon. But it incorporates memories and recollections of how they got to that afternoon. So it's kind of that like closed box scenario, and it's done very, very well. I give it 4 stars. Um, and it's a really cool dissection and reflection of, you know, our relationships, especially as we age and as we define them in increasingly more standardized ways, like what it means to be married and what that means to you is going to mean something totally different to me, even though we might use the same terminology and we might both call ourselves wives or married. It doesn't mean that we all have this singular understanding of what expectations are reasonable or what expectations are like unspoken versus like fully articulated. And I think that's true as well of friendship, especially as we get older and um, as we kind of move away from like the childhood and adolescent definitions of what a friend is, um, and how we sort of define that alongside relationships that require and engender a lot of intimacy, but we maybe don't call them friendships. So, for instance, like I'm married, I have a husband who is also my friend, um, but I also have friends who I do not treat at all like my husband. And there are friends that, uh, you know, might be my friends and not really his friends, and vice versa. So this book is kind of like a pressure cooker of those relationships and those experiences, and who I think it really explores like who decides what your definitions are and how you're going to live your life based on those definitions and those values. So, really enjoyed it. 4 stars. Now, on to my April reading stats. So, as I said before, I read 8 books, over 2,336 pages. The average time for me to finish a book was about 14 days. The top 3 moods of my readings were tense, lighthearted, and funny. So, I don't remember, other than Canterville Ghost, what were. I'm curious to know what the funny ones were. Let's take a look. Just 3 of them. Oh, okay. The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, All Creatures Great and Small, because there were a lot of funny moments, and The Canterville Ghost. Okay. Pacing. 63% of my books were medium paced, 25% were fast, and 13% were slow. Page numbers. I had 38% of the books were under 300 pages. Oh, that's interesting. And 63% of the books were 300 to 499. And then I read 25% fiction, no, 25% nonfiction, 75% fiction. And the biggest genres were classics, that was 3 books, and then romance, memoir, fantasy, and contemporary. 2 fantasies. Oh, The Canterville Ghost counts as fantasy, as does The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. Cool. And then my average star rating was 4.5. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know what you finished in April, what you plan on reading in May. I would love to hear all about it, and I will see you in my next video.